It began with a flash. A single message sent from the stars sliced through the quiet hum of Earth's communication systems. It wasn't much, just a few simple words, but those words carried the weight of the universe. The Galactic Senate had spoken, and their words were a warning. Humanity is too dangerous to remain armed. For the safety of the galaxy, we demand immediate disarmament. The message came not just to Earth's leaders, but to every corner of the globe. Governments were left stunned, the people confused, but in the silence that followed, something else began to rise. Fear, anger, defiance. For years, humanity had struggled with its own inner demons, battling wars of its own making. But something changed when Earth first looked up and ventured into the stars. With each new planet discovered, each new star system conquered, humanity began to realize that it was capable of far more than just destruction. It was capable of greatness. And now, just as they were beginning to understand their place in the universe, the Galactic Senate, the so-called Guardians of Peace, decided humanity wasn't fit to wield weapons. The very same Senate that had watched humanity grow, thrive, and fight for survival in the vastness of space now feared what Earth could become. They feared humans. The first response came from Earth's United Nations. Leaders from every nation gathered in emergency meetings. Politicians, scientists, military officials, everyone was in the room trying to make sense of what seemed like an impossible demand. How could they disarm Earth? How could they take away the very thing that had kept humanity alive, that had allowed them to rise out of the ashes of war and create something worth protecting? "Is this really what they want?" asked the President of the United States, her voice steady but laced with frustration. "Do they think we'll just lay down our weapons and accept this? We fought for everything we have, our freedom, our right to defend ourselves." The room fell silent. The President's words echoed in the ears of everyone present. No one had the answer. The truth was, no one knew what the Senate had planned. All they knew was that the message came with a threat. But it wasn't just the political leaders who were affected. The people of Earth, ordinary men and women, felt the sting of the message as well. News outlets exploded with coverage. Social media was flooded with reactions: fear, anger, confusion, and disbelief. Earth had always fought for its freedom. From the first war for independence to the struggle against tyranny in all its forms, humanity had always believed that no one could take away its right to stand tall, to defend itself. The Senate wanted to strip away that right. They wanted to remove humanity's power, not just in the physical sense, but in the very soul of the human spirit. It was a cold, calculated move to cripple Earth's potential. The question now was, what would Earth do about it? The response came quickly, but it wasn't from any government or world leader. It came from a group of scientists working in a quiet, forgotten lab deep beneath the surface of the Earth. In secret, a group of brilliant minds, led by an unlikely man, a former soldier-turned-scientist named William Hayes, began work on a project. They knew that the Senate's threats weren't empty. They had seen the power that these alien species possessed, the incredible technology that could wipe out entire civilizations with a single blow. But they also knew something else. Earth had something the Senate didn't understand, something that no one could take away. It was humanity's drive to survive. That was the real weapon. Hayes stood in the center of the lab, staring at a large blueprint pinned to the wall. His face was hard, his eyes sharp with determination. His team worked around him, their fingers flying over computers, testing algorithms, running simulations. They weren't building a weapon in the traditional sense. They weren't designing bombs or missiles. They were building something else entirely. A strategy, a defense, a plan that would show the Senate that Earth wasn't to be underestimated. It was a defiance that burned in every human heart. "We're not going to beg for our survival," Hayes muttered under his breath, his voice low but full of fire. "We're going to show them what it means to challenge us. We'll make them understand why they shouldn't mess with humanity." Back on the surface, a storm of emotions raged. As the Senate's deadline approached, the world's military forces mobilized. Tanks rolled through city streets, fighter jets soared across skies, and soldiers trained for the impossible. Earth wasn't about to roll over without a fight. But in the midst of it all, there was a quiet, subtle shift in the way people thought about the threat. They weren't just defending themselves from an alien power anymore. They were defending everything that made them human, everything they had worked for. The dreams, the hopes, the beliefs that had shaped Earth's future. They weren't going to let that be taken away, not without a fight. In small towns, in crowded cities, in the hearts of every human alive, the same question burned. What happens now? What would Earth do when faced with the most powerful coalition of civilizations the galaxy had ever seen? They would answer with the one thing the Senate didn't count on. They would answer with defiance, with fire, with everything humanity had in its soul. And they would make sure the universe knew one thing. Humanity would never bow down. The Galactic Senate thought they could control Earth, but they were about to find out the hard way humanity would never be disarmed. On the distant world of Corellan Prime, the heart of the Galactic Senate, an emergency meeting was in full swing. It was held in a grand hall that echoed with the sounds of debate, a massive space where alien leaders from hundreds of species gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance. The seats were filled with representatives from the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. And they were laughing. "They're just children playing with matches," said Zelthar, a reptilian warlord with skin as black as the void. He drummed his claws on the table, his cold, calculating eyes scanning the faces of his fellow senators. "Earth's entire military is nothing compared to the fleets we've already sent. They can't even reach the stars without help." Next to him, a small, insected figure named Drasna from the Klar hive clicked its mandibles in agreement. "Primitive, simple, they will break easily just as the others before them. Let us not waste time, we have already warned them." A third voice, the booming, resonant tones of Vihoran, a being from the gas giant planet of Thalkar, rumbled through the room. "Our people have observed the humans. They lack discipline. The humans' greatest strength is their unpredictability, but it is not enough to stop us. A single fleet could wipe them from existence." Despite the arrogance in their words, the Senate's chamber felt uneasy. There was an undercurrent of fear that no one was willing to admit aloud. A quiet worry that maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated humanity. But the fear was brief. There was too much pride in the room, too much confidence. "They are nothing," muttered Kalinos, a cold, calculating representative from the Selbri, an empire known for its mastery of psychic manipulation. "We've already seen the measure of their strength. Let us disarm them as we have with countless species before. After all, their weaponry is nothing compared to ours." And so the decision was made. Without further debate, they voted. The decree was final. Humanity would be disarmed, their weapons taken, their military crushed beneath the weight of the Senate's will. Earth had no place among the stars if it could not be controlled. The message was sent immediately. Back on Earth, the leaders watched in stunned silence as the Senate's decision was broadcast to every corner of the planet. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of intent. Earth's very right to defend itself was being stripped away by a group of cold, distant beings. The Senate's arrogance was too much to bear. They thought humanity could simply bend to their will. But humanity wasn't going to bend. Across the globe, there was no panic, no desperation. Instead, there was resolve. "Is this what they want?" President Alina Hayes asked the gathered world leaders, her voice steady but tinged with something far more dangerous. "Do they really think we'll roll over? They want to take away our weapons, our right to protect ourselves." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. "Well, they have another thing coming." The room was silent for a long moment. It was clear that President Hayes wasn't just speaking to the world's leaders. She was speaking to Earth itself. And as she looked out over the faces of those in the room, she saw something. It wasn't just defiance, it was determination. She stood up. "We will not beg for our freedom, we will not surrender, Earth will fight." At the same time, in the hidden depths of Earth's military facilities, an emergency code was broadcast. William Hayes, the scientist who had first warned the president of the Senate's power, was working frantically. "We need something more," he muttered, his eyes scanning data on a dozen different screens. "The Senate doesn't know what they're dealing with, but they will." His team worked around him, their hands moving with purpose. They didn't have time for second thoughts. The aliens had made their move, and humanity's response couldn't be just a message of defiance. It had to be a promise. A promise that humanity wouldn't just survive, but fight back. "We've been at war with ourselves for centuries," Hayes said, looking at the screens. "But we're not the same species that was almost wiped out by its own stupidity. They think we're fragile. They think we'll fall to our knees. I think they're about to find out how wrong they are." The plan was set. Humanity had something that no one, no Senate, no fleet could anticipate. They had resilience, and a determination that came from centuries of fighting and surviving. Hayes glanced at the blueprint of the first phase of their plan. It wasn't some grand weapon. No, it was something more subtle, something more terrifying. A network. A network of hidden defenses spread throughout Earth's solar system that would ensure no fleet could approach without first facing an overwhelming response. But humanity wasn't just fighting for its survival. They were fighting for the right to exist as they were, not as pawns in some galactic game of power. No one had the right to decide Earth's fate except Earth itself. Meanwhile, in the Senate chamber on Corallan Prime, the mood was far different. The alien leaders were still filled with their own arrogance, convinced that the humans would fold under the pressure. They had no idea what was coming. "What do we do now?" one of the senators asked, glancing at the communications officer nervously. The message had been sent. Earth had been given its warning. "They'll submit. They always do," Kalinos said, his voice thick with superiority. But there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He turned back to the officer. "Check again, make sure they received it." And so the Senate waited. The silence stretched on. On Earth, the message had been received, but it was far from a call for surrender. It was a call to arms. Humanity had been pushed too far, and they were about to show the universe that no one, not even the mighty Galactic Senate, could decide Earth's fate for them. And this time, humanity was fighting not just for survival, but for something much more important: their freedom. The stars above Earth were quiet for now, but the silence was deceiving. Below, the planet hummed with activity, the air thick with tension. Earth had been given an ultimatum by the Galactic Senate: disarm or face the consequences. The message had been received, and humanity was already preparing for war. But this wouldn't be a war like any other. This wouldn't be a fight for territory or power. It would be a fight for survival. And humanity wasn't about to roll over. In the deep vaults beneath the surface of Earth, William Hayes stood before a massive holographic map, his fingers tracing the paths of thousands of satellites, drones, and hidden defense systems that would soon be activated. He wasn't alone. Around him, scientists, military strategists, and engineers worked tirelessly, their faces focused but determined. Every single one of them knew what was at stake. The Senate thought they could simply take Earth's weapons and break humanity's spirit. But they had made a grave mistake. They didn't understand what humanity was made of. They didn't know that, when pushed to the edge, humans fought back harder, fiercer, and smarter than any species the galaxy had ever known. The plan was simple: no grand armies marching to battle, no flashy weapons of mass destruction. Instead, it was a network, an intricate web of defense systems, satellites, and traps, all carefully placed in orbit and across Earth's solar system. Humanity's strength wasn't in raw power, it was in their ability to adapt, to survive, to outthink the enemy. And that's exactly what they would do. "We'll make sure they know we're ready," Hayes said, his voice low but firm. He didn't need to say more. Everyone in the room understood. The network was ready. They had one shot, one opportunity to show the galaxy what Earth could do when it was backed into a corner. And if the Senate thought they could just wipe Earth off the map, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. High above Earth, in the cold expanse of space, the alien fleets began to arrive. Dozens of ships, their hulls gleaming with technology far beyond humanity's own, moved into position. They were massive, imposing, and they carried the full force of the Galactic Senate's military might. These were the ships that could turn entire planets to ash. These were the fleets that would crush Earth beneath their boots. And yet, as the fleets moved closer, something felt off. The alien commanders exchanged uneasy glances as their sensors scanned the area. There were no signs of resistance. No fleets of human ships waiting in space. No signs of any major defenses at all. They had expected Earth's military to put up a fight, but this was eerily quiet. It almost felt like the humans had already given up. "Ready the fleets," barked General Zather, a towering figure from the K'Tari Empire. "We move in, no further delays." The ships began their descent into Earth's atmosphere, their weapons primed, their engines glowing as they powered toward the surface. But as they entered Earth's orbit, a flicker of light appeared across the sky. It wasn't just one. It was hundreds, thousands. A network of tiny satellites, each one armed with powerful, unseen weapons, began to activate. A series of flashes erupted across the vast expanse of space. The first ship in the fleet shuddered violently as it was struck by a bolt of energy. Its shields flared, but they couldn't hold against the force. In a matter of seconds, the ship exploded, its debris scattering across space. The other ships hesitated, the shockwave of the first explosion still rippling through the vacuum. What the hell? Zather growled. This wasn't in the reports. There's no way they had this much firepower hidden. But it was too late. More ships began to fall, their weapons ineffective against the network humanity had built. The hidden defense systems had been waiting for them, each one carefully placed, each one prepared to strike the moment the fleets crossed into Earth's territory. On the surface, chaos erupted. The world's militaries, once only in a state of preparedness, now sprang into action. Soldiers scrambled to their posts, fighter jets shot through the skies, and naval ships launched from their ports. But this wasn't just an organized military force moving out. It was every human being on Earth standing together, fighting not just for survival, but for their right to be free. As the alien fleets began to disintegrate, their commanders scrambled to regain control. But they were losing, fast. Back in Earth's command center, Hayes watched the battle unfold on the massive holographic screen in front of him. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his eyes were focused. He had known that humanity's strength wasn't in raw power, it was in their will to survive. And now he was seeing it firsthand. But they weren't done yet, not by a long shot. The aliens would keep coming. They would send more ships, more forces, and Earth had to be ready. "We need to keep the pressure on," Hayes ordered. "Activate Phase 2, get the ground forces moving." Within moments, Earth's defense systems began to shift. The second wave of humanity's response was ready to go. Entire cities had been converted into bunkers, designed to withstand even the harshest attacks. Massive cannons, once thought obsolete, now roared to life, firing powerful shells into the sky, cutting through alien ships with deadly precision. The alien forces, already stretched thin, began to panic. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back. They thought they could crush Earth with a single, overwhelming blow. But Earth wasn't just any planet, it was humanity's home, and they would defend it with everything they had. In space, General Zather watched as his fleet crumbled. His massive flagship, a symbol of the Qatari Empire's might, was losing power. The lights flickered as the ship shuddered under the barrage of human weaponry. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered, his voice barely audible in the chaos. He turned to his second-in-command. "Get us out of here, now." But as the fleet retreated, one thing became clear to the Senate. Humanity was not a species to be easily defeated, and Earth was a force they had no right to challenge. The message had been sent, and it was clear: humanity wasn't going anywhere. The battle had raged for hours, but the fight was far from over. Above Earth, the remnants of the alien fleet still circled, desperate to regroup. Below, the world's military forces mobilized like never before. Fighters streaked across the skies, while soldiers, tanks, and armored vehicles poured into key positions around the globe. Every nation had put aside its differences, uniting for the first time under one banner: survival. Humanity wasn't just fighting for its right to live, it was fighting to send a message to the galaxy. We are not weak, we are not helpless. And the message was getting through. In the command center, President Alina Hayes stood in front of a massive screen, watching as the situation unfolded. The display was a swirl of red dots and flashing lights, tracking the movements of enemy ships, human fighters, and ground forces. "Phase 2 is a success," Hayes said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of responsibility. "We're holding them off, but we can't let up, not yet." Her advisors nodded. It wasn't just about holding Earth's defenses. It was about making sure the Senate understood that Earth would never bow to their will. Every alien ship that fell, every enemy that retreated, was a step closer to showing the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. "Sir, we've just received another transmission from the Senate," a communications officer called out. Hayes turned sharply. The message was coming through loud and clear, but it wasn't what anyone expected. "Put it on screen." The room fell silent as the holographic image of an alien emissary appeared in front of them. His face was a mix of reptilian and insectoid features, his eyes cold and calculating. "This is General Zather of the Qatari Empire," the alien said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You have caused significant damage to our forces. We did not expect this resistance." The image of Zather flickered as his ship took more hits from Earth's relentless barrage. He was clearly struggling to maintain control of his fleet. "We will not stop. Your people will fall. The Senate will see to it. You cannot win this war." But Hayes wasn't intimidated. She stepped forward, her face hardening with determination. "We've already won. she said, her voice filled with quiet power. You underestimated us, and now you'll learn just how wrong you were. The alien's eyes flashed with anger, but he said nothing more. With a sharp motion, the transmission cut off, leaving the room in stunned silence. Meanwhile, deep in the heart of Earth's military network, William Hayes was working overtime. His team was already preparing the final phase of the defense plan, an all-out counteroffensive. The Senate had underestimated not just humanity's will to fight, but also its ingenuity. While the first waves of attack had been strategic, the next move would be something different. Phase 3 is ready, Hayes said, his voice laced with excitement and urgency. We'll hit them where it hurts. We know they think they can just obliterate Earth and be done with it. We've been waiting for this moment. The plan wasn't to wait for the aliens to make their next move. It was to go on the offensive. They would show the Senate exactly how far humanity was willing to go. The skies over Earth burned with the heat of battle. The one sun-touched fleet of Qatari ships, now scattered and broken, struggled to stay intact as they fought against humanity's defenses. Alien ships that had once seemed invincible were now nothing more than debris, falling from the heavens one by one. And humanity wasn't slowing down. The tide was turning. On the ground, soldiers, armed with the latest technology, pushed forward, advancing toward key alien strongholds that had been set up on Earth's moons. No more would Earth cower in the shadow of alien power. No more would they be dictated to by beings who saw them as nothing more than an inconvenience. Humanity was proving, day by day, that they would fight with everything they had, even if it meant taking the battle straight to the enemy. Back on Corellan Prime, the Senate's chambers were filled with tense discussions. The leaders of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had gathered to address the crisis. But as the holographic images of the ongoing battle flashed across their screens, a sense of disbelief began to settle over the room. We underestimated them, Zathar admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. They're fighting back harder than any species we've ever faced. They're not like the others. The Senate was quiet for a long moment, each leader considering the weight of his words. For once, their arrogance faltered. This is a problem we cannot ignore, Vihoran, the towering Thalkir leader, said. The humans are more resilient than we thought. They have more than just weapons. They have something else, something we haven't faced before. Fear spread like wildfire through the room. The Senate had believed that the galaxy was their domain, that their control over other species was absolute. They had never encountered a race that fought like this. The humans had broken their expectations. They had shown the galaxy that when pushed to the brink, they were capable of surviving and even thriving. We cannot afford to lose more ships, Drasna, the Kular representative, warned. They will keep coming, they won't stop. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Senate, the leaders of the galaxy were starting to doubt their own power. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. On Earth, the situation was changing faster than anyone had anticipated. Humanity had held its ground, but now it was taking the fight to the Senate itself. They had struck the first blow. They had proven they were not to be underestimated. And as the final phase of the plan began to unfold, it was clear humanity wasn't just going to survive this war. They were going to win. And in doing so, they would prove something far more important to the galaxy. That no one, not even the most powerful civilizations, could break the spirit of Earth. Humanity would never be anyone's pawn, and the Senate would soon learn that the price of underestimating Earth was far higher than they could have ever imagined. The sun had set over Earth's surface, but above the planet, the sky burned with the fierce glow of distant battles. Humanity had fought for its survival, and now they were ready to take the fight to the heart of the Galactic Senate itself. For the first time, the alien fleets were on the defensive. The mighty Qatari ships, once considered invincible, were nothing more than shattered debris floating in space. The Senate's carefully orchestrated assault on Earth had turned into a desperate retreat, but that wasn't enough to stop them. No, humanity had learned something important through all the years of war and conflict. Survival wasn't just about fighting back, it was about staying in the fight no matter the odds, and Earth wasn't backing down. In the command center, President Alina Hayes stood, her eyes locked on the holographic display in front of her. The battle had shifted in their favor, but she knew this wasn't the end. The Senate would send more ships, more forces. They always did. The galaxy's powerhouses were arrogant. They believed their strength was enough to crush anything that stood in their way. They didn't realize what they were up against. The communications officer stepped forward, a look of urgency on his face. "Ma'am, we've received a transmission. It's from the Senate." Hayes narrowed her eyes. "Put it through." The message came through as a cold, mechanical transmission. A familiar voice, one they'd all heard before. It was General Zather, his image flickering, clearly struggling to keep his ship from falling apart under the weight of Earth's relentless assault. "You have cost us too much," Zather's voice boomed, his anger palpable even through the distortion. "The Senate will not forgive this. You will pay for your defiance." His words were laced with bitterness, but President Hayes wasn't shaken. She knew this was just another empty threat from a defeated general. "You're out of time, Zather," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You underestimated humanity. Now you'll face the consequences." Zather's image flickered one last time before the transmission was abruptly cut off. There was no more bravado, no more boasting. It was clear that the aliens had lost their edge. They weren't just fighting to defeat Earth anymore. They were fighting for survival. Meanwhile, in the heart of the alien fleet, the mood was far different. The once-proud ships of the Katari Empire, the Klar Hive, and the Thalkar Dominion were now little more than floating wrecks. Alien commanders scrambled to pull together what was left of their forces, but it was clear they were losing. The humans weren't just resisting, they were taking the fight directly to them. In the dark corners of space, one final fleet of Katari warships was gathering. Their target, Earth's moon, the last of humanity's outer defenses. If they could destroy that, the rest of humanity would fall. They knew the Earth defense systems were strong, but they were banking on sheer force overcoming it. It would be their final chance to crush humanity's spirit once and for all. On Earth's surface, the world was alive with movement. Tanks rumbled across war-torn cities, soldiers scrambled to reinforce positions, and fighter jets soared overhead. But humanity wasn't just fighting a conventional war anymore. They were building something new, something more than just weapons. They were building unity. They had learned that true strength didn't lie in firepower alone. It was in their ability to adapt, to innovate, to work together. And now, with the final assault on the moon imminent, humanity's counterattack was ready. William Hayes, standing in a quiet corner of the command center, looked up at the holographic map. He didn't need to say a word. His team knew what was coming next. "Activate the fleet," he said simply. Dozens of human ships, now armed with weapons they had never dared to dream of, began to rise from Earth's atmosphere. Each ship was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a testament to their refusal to give up. But these weren't just battleships, they were a message, a declaration. As the fleet moved toward the moon, the alien fleet above Earth's surface moved into position. But they hadn't anticipated the speed of the counteroffensive. Humanity wasn't just reacting, they were striking. The first wave of human ships collided with the remaining Katari warships in a blaze of fire and fury. The once proud alien ships began to disintegrate under the assault, their shields ineffective against humanity's relentless firepower. For the first time, the Senate's forces saw what the humans were truly capable of. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for the future. In the Senate chambers on Corallan Prime, the atmosphere had shifted. The once immense arrogance that had defined the ruling elite now gave way to a creeping dread. The alien commanders who had once believed that humanity could be crushed with a single move were now realizing that the humans were more than just dangerous. They were unpredictable, and unpredictable meant uncontrollable. "We need to end this now," said Drasna, her voice filled with frustration. "If we don't, we risk losing everything. The humans have already proven they can fight." Zather, still clinging to the remnants of his shattered fleet, scowled. "It's too late. We can't retreat now." But the damage was done. Earth's counteroffensive had already crippled their forces. Their last hope, an overwhelming strike on the moon, had failed, and with it any chance of maintaining control over the human world. Back on Earth, the battle for the moon was over. The final alien ships had been destroyed, their remnants floating aimlessly in the void. Humanity's victory was certain. But there was something else in the air, a feeling of something more profound than just military triumph. The war wasn't just about winning, it was about sending a message. The Galactic Senate had underestimated humanity. They had tried to take away Earth's right to stand tall. They had tried to disarm them, and in the end they had failed. Humanity had proven to the galaxy that Earth would never be anyone's puppet. No matter the odds, no matter the threat, they would always fight back. And as President Alina Hayes looked out over the horizon, her heart filled with pride. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a symbol that would stand for centuries to come. Humanity wasn't just a species. It was a force that could never be defeated. The battle was over. The enemy fleets that once darkened the skies above Earth were now nothing but debris, scattered in the cold void of space. The alien invaders, so sure of their superiority, had been driven back. Their ships, once the pride of the Galactic Senate, now drifted lifelessly, consumed by the fury of humanity's defiance. For the first time in the long history of the Senate, Earth had sent a message that could not be ignored. It wasn't just a victory, it was a declaration. Earth would never bend to anyone. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand what humanity had always known. When pushed to the brink, they fought harder than anyone else. On the surface of Earth, the tension began to dissipate, but it wasn't over. The victory had been hard-won, and the scars of the battle remained. Cities lay in ruins. The damage to infrastructure was immense. But even as the dust settled, there was a sense of something more, something far greater than just the military triumph. The people of Earth had come together in a way the world had never seen before. Nations that once bickered and fought over borders now stood side by side. People who had once viewed one another with suspicion now fought for a common cause. Humanity had come together in the face of a greater enemy, and they had triumphed. But there was still one thing left to do. The Senate had to be dealt with. At the heart of Earth's command center, President Alina Hayes stood before a giant holographic display, staring at the swirling mass of space. The enemy ships, broken and scattered, had been dealt with, but the real challenge still lay ahead: the Senate. "We've won the battle," Hayes said, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of the situation. "But the war with the Senate is just beginning." Behind her, the faces of her advisors were tense, their eyes filled with the same understanding. The Senate wasn't a group that would simply accept defeat. They were powerful, and they would not back down easily, but they had underestimated humanity. That much was clear now, and Earth had proven that it wouldn't be silenced. "We've sent them a message," Hayes continued. "But it's not enough to survive. It's not enough just to win. We have to make sure they understand this. Earth is not some planet to be controlled. We are free, and we will never let anyone take that freedom from us again." One of her generals, a seasoned veteran named Colonel Marcus, stepped forward. "We've received word from the Senate's representatives on Corallan Prime. They want to negotiate. They're offering a ceasefire." The room fell silent. Negotiation. It seemed almost absurd after everything that had happened, after the destruction, after the bloodshed, but the Senate had no choice. They had been humbled. And yet humanity had to be careful. A ceasefire could be a trick. It could be a way to buy time for another strike. Hayes narrowed her eyes. "We'll meet with them, but on our terms. We will not be their puppets, not now, not ever." Back on Corallan Prime, the Senate's leaders gathered in a massive chamber, their faces clouded with uncertainty. The once unstoppable force that had crushed so many other civilizations was now looking at its own downfall. They had thought Earth was weak. They had thought humanity was easy to control. But now, after the bloodshed and the destruction, the Senate leaders were beginning to realize the full extent of their mistake. "We've lost," said Zelthar, the cold reptilian warlord, his voice laced with bitterness. "The humans have proven themselves. This is not a race we can subdue easily." Drasna, the insectoid leader from the Qular hive, sat motionless, her antennae twitching in agitation. "We can't afford to lose face in front of the galaxy, but we can't ignore the reality either. Earth has proven it will not be controlled. What now?" General Zather, who had once believed the K'tari Empire could wipe Earth away with a single strike, stood with clenched fists. "We can't admit defeat, not openly, but perhaps there's a way to come to terms with them. We can't keep fighting, not after what we've seen." The Senate chamber was filled with murmurs of agreement. There was no denying it anymore. Earth had won. But it wasn't just the battle they had won. They had won the respect of the galaxy. The Senate would have to face the consequences of underestimating a species that would not bow to their will. The transmission came through from Corallan Prime. It wasn't a threat this time. No, this was different. The Senate was asking for a meeting, not just for a ceasefire, but for peace. The representatives of the Senate wanted to talk, to negotiate. Hayes sat in the command center, her face calm, but her mind racing. This was a moment of incredible importance. The Senate was finally acknowledging what humanity had always known: Earth was not to be underestimated. Set up the meeting, Hayes ordered. But make no mistake, we go in on our terms. If they want peace, they'll have to respect us. We will not accept anything less. As the diplomatic channels opened, the tension in the room was palpable. The next few moments could change the future of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The Senate had no choice but to face the reality. Earth had won, and now it was their turn to listen. The meeting on Corellan Prime was unlike any the Senate had held before. For the first time, Earth's representatives were not on the defensive. For the first time, Earth stood tall, unafraid, and ready to dictate the terms of their future. As President Hayes entered the chamber, she knew the stakes were higher than ever. This was the moment when Earth would finally be heard, not just as a planet, but as a symbol of resistance, a symbol of defiance. And as she looked out at the alien leaders, she knew one thing for certain. They had made a grave mistake when they underestimated humanity. They had awakened a force they could never hope to control. The Senate's grand chamber on Corellan Prime was silent, but there was a palpable tension in the air. It was unlike any meeting the Galactic Senate had ever held. For centuries, they had ruled over the galaxy with an iron fist, dictating the terms of every interaction, every battle, every negotiation. But today was different. Today, they were facing humanity, Earth, a species they had underestimated, a species that had just proven it would not be controlled. The long, narrow chamber stretched out before President Alina Hayes. She stood at the front, flanked by her top advisors, all of them tense but resolute. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting. This was the moment that would define humanity's future. Would Earth be just another pawn in the Senate's vast game of galactic power, or would they stand as equals, respected and free? Hayes had never felt such a weight on her shoulders, but she carried it with grace. Her face was calm, her eyes unwavering as she faced the alien leaders who had once thought of humanity as nothing more than a troublesome species to be tamed. The Senate chamber was filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. The cold-blooded Kaitari, the insectoid Kular, the towering Thalker, and many more. All of them had witnessed Earth's relentless defense and surprising strength, but none of them had fully grasped what humanity was capable of. "President Hayes," said a voice. It was Zathar, the Kaitari general, his features twisted in a mix of frustration and reluctant respect. "We are here to discuss terms. Your people have made it clear that they will not be intimidated, that they will not submit. The Senate has taken losses. Too many losses." Hayes didn't flinch. She had heard these words before, and they meant nothing. She had faced far worse in her life. "You've lost more than just ships, Zathar. You've lost your pride, and now you'll have to face the truth." She glanced at the alien leaders, all of whom were waiting for her next words. They weren't sure what to expect, but they all knew one thing. Humanity had forced them to this table. It was Earth's turn to speak. "We've already won, Zathar," Hayes said, her voice strong but measured. "Not just in battle, but in what we've proven. We've shown you that we won't be ruled. We won't be your puppets. Humanity is a force in this galaxy, and that's something you'll have to accept." The chamber was dead silent. The alien leaders exchanged glances, but none dared interrupt. For the first time, they realized that Earth wasn't just a problem to be solved. It was a problem that demanded respect. Zathar let out a slow, controlled breath. "What do you want, then? What terms will you accept?" It was a simple question, but it carried a weight that would shape the future. Hayes stepped forward, the full weight of humanity's determination behind her words. "We want peace, Zathar, but not on your terms. We want to be free. No more interference. No more demands. Earth will make its own future." The alien leaders stared at her, stunned. The audacity of her words, the courage behind them, it was almost too much for them to comprehend. For centuries, they had assumed their place at the top of the galaxy. They had wiped out civilizations that didn't bend to their will. But humanity wasn't like the others. Humanity had a strength, a fire that couldn't be extinguished by force alone. "We will no longer tolerate being treated as lesser beings," Hayes continued. "We will work with other species, yes. We will trade, we will learn, we will grow, but only on equal terms, and we will protect our planet, our people, with everything we have." A murmur rippled through the chamber. For the first time, the Senate leaders began to see the full picture. The humans they had once thought of as inferior were now standing toe-to-toe with them, demanding equality, demanding respect. And they couldn't ignore it. They couldn't simply wipe Earth off the map like they had done with so many others. The Thalker leader, Vihoran, the towering figure who had once believed in the Senate's unshakable power, finally spoke. "You're asking for too much, Earth. The Senate will never allow a race like yours to grow unchecked. You're too unpredictable, too dangerous. Ironically, Hayes said with a small, knowing smile, that's exactly why you should fear us, because you've seen what happens when you try to control us. We will fight back. We will always fight back. For a moment, the room was quiet. The Senate leaders, once so sure of themselves, were now left to wrestle with the reality that they had been wrong. They had thought they could crush humanity with a single blow. Instead, they had awakened something they couldn't control. Zather's voice broke the silence, quieter this time. What do you propose, then? Hayes took a deep breath. The negotiation wasn't over, but the most important part had been done. She had made it clear that Earth would no longer be subjugated, and now it was time to lay out the terms. We propose a new era of cooperation, one where Earth is treated as an equal member of the galaxy. We will respect your sovereignty, and we expect the same in return. No more interference in our affairs, and we demand that you help rebuild the damage you've caused. Her voice was firm, yet fair. Humanity had fought for this moment, and now they were taking it. The Senate had tried to disarm Earth. They had tried to crush its spirit. But in the end, they had underestimated humanity's strength. The alien leaders sat in silence, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. After a long pause, Zather stood. We will consider your terms, Earth, but know this, the galaxy will never look at you the same way again. Hayes nodded, her eyes burning with pride. And that's the point, Zather. As the meeting came to a close, the Senate's leaders were left to digest the truth of what had happened. Earth had not only survived the Senate's wrath, they had emerged stronger, more united, and ready to stand on their own. The galaxy would never forget the day when humanity stood up, not just for its survival, but for its place in the stars. And as Earth's representatives left the Senate chamber, one thing was clear. The Galactic Senate had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity would never be ruled again.